We'll do it live.
Hello and welcome to Under the Sticks, finally this evening, a podcast brought to you by Pro14 Rugby and powered by BigRedCloud.com. Visit www.bigredcloud.com for all your online accounting needs. We took our little break. It was only a couple of weeks. We did our Saturday morning thing, but that's kind of a different vibe. But now we're back. Wednesday night, we have Mr. Sean Holley. How are you?
Good. Fantastic. Had a great weekend. Enjoy the Super Rugby, doing the Crusaders. Particularly enjoying that Saturday morning stuff. But more importantly, straight after the show on Saturday mornings, I go play golf and I won the tournament on Saturday. My second win this lockdown period. So it's working, boys. Just keep it going.
They won't stand for this. They'll cut you. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I'm 9.8. They've cut me to 9.8.
9.8. That's good.
Have they? Finally. Yeah, we've words for people like you. Yeah. From the stringing room in the tennis wing, it's Mr. Paul Williams. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, gents. How are you? And I've got my new little posh Hollywood light. Which is making me look resplendent.
It's fantastic. We're looking very posh
Holly.
this week.
Holly looks like something from Hollywood. It's ridiculous.
There's no light there. His skin just glows.
For Talbot.
We have producer Adam Redmond keeping things running.
Yes, trying to. So to anybody looking or listening, if Andy disappears for a little while, I will have to step into those big shoes and steer the ship. What could possibly go wrong?
Oh, it's okay. There's lots that can go wrong tonight. Owain Jones, here to help us go wrong. Formerly editor of Rugby World magazine, now Rugby Pass. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. The technology's working for me at the moment. And all the nerves, the clammy hands are there, being with professionals, your good selves. But yeah, looking forward to having a little chin wag.
Excellent. So listen, look ahead to the show. We are going to be looking at the Pro 14's greatest ever 15. Is that the appropriate term, Adam Redmond? I think it is.
Ultimate 15.
The ultimate 15, greatest ever.
Yeah, we may debate this.
I think we will. There's a couple that we need to talk about as mature adults. We're going to be talking about rugby really returning up this side of the world. Guinness Pro 14 restart fixtures were announced today. This is great. It's going to be great just to get rugby back up and running at a normal time of the day. And then World Rugby announced their rest of 2020 test calendar as well, so we'll touch on that as well. Get your comments in. We'll slip them into the show as they come via YouTube, Facebook. We'll keep a scan on the Twitter machine as well. Bear Hug, those purveyors of excellent supports, are still giving away gear for the best questioner comment. So we'll come back to that later on. Gentlemen, I suppose, how are we? Did we do anything interesting over a little break, Paul Williams?
I watched a lot of Super Rugby with you boys. that's about it. You say we've had a break. I've seen you all every Saturday morning. So yeah, I've really enjoyed the Super Rugby, but I've got to say I'm looking forward to the start of the Pro 14, and it felt real today. Seeing the fixtures, it was all a little bit ethereal the last couple of weeks, and we've been, voting about fictitious teams and the best this and the best that, which is great, but it's fantastic to see the real fixtures penned in.
It is good, yeah. Sean, I mean, having fixtures up now in your world means, you might have to stop your holidays and actually work for a living.
It'd be nice, as safe as we're all trying to be, I'm still desperate to work. This is why Under the Sticks on a Saturday and a Wednesday has been a bit of a godsend, really, because as well as you keep in touch, it's nice to bounce off people and people writing in, and it's nice to just check up on things, who the signings have been. I've been lucky enough that Pro 14, I've been interviewing coaches to see how they've been going during lockdown. And now, finally, we can get to see a chance of what they have been doing. and what teams are shaping up like physically, mentally, because there's a lot on some of the games for some of the teams and not a lot for others. However, they will be in a mindset now that they'll have one eye on next season, those who don't have a lot to play for. So, I think we're watching football, we're watching Super Rugby, we're watching other sports with no crowds. So it's become a little bit of the norm. Viewers are used to that now. We've had a question for Howell Davis. I take it'll be behind closed doors. They will be initially be behind closed doors, but it doesn't matter, because for me, what we're watching in terms of like the football, it's still live sport. So I'm really hungry for it. Can't wait. And yeah, it'd be great to get back on the box as well.
Will be. So we'll get to our Ultimate 15 in a little while, but let's get through this announcement first. So Adam Redmond, you were teasing us earlier on, potentially Pro 14 Rugby deciding just to hold it back to keep us all waiting. But we have real fixtures and real dates that are now pretty much locked in, albeit, caveat, there's still a lot of unknowns out there. So fill us in.
Yeah, well, so we've got a full weekend, round 14 and 15, starting on the 21st of August. So that's 2 weeks in a row, 2 weekends full of derby action, albeit not in South Africa just yet. And the season's going to finish up. The regular season finishes up after round 15. And what we've done is also, so the European qualification will be based off the table as it was in round 13, because obviously we're going into a uncharted sort of end to the season. So what we're doing is we're able to get the top 2 teams from each conference into semi-finals and a final and play that off. That was a big ask from our clubs. They didn't want a consolidated league table. They didn't want to just hand a title to somebody. The clubs wanted the opportunity to get into the semi-finals, get to a final, because as Sean will tell you, anything can happen in knockout rugby no matter where the game is played, and you can end up upsetting the favourites. Although I suppose when you look back at that 2010 Ospreys team, not necessarily an underdog, really. Not really an underdog.
Anything can happen, particularly at the RDS.
Half that team is in our Ultimate 15. They weren't underdogs.
No, as we all know, as Paul Williams knows, that team didn't really need a coach. Isn't that right?
That's what I said. Sean knows this. I could have coached that. No worries. No, exactly. It's Sean, that was a fantastic squad that he had back then in 2010. Amazing squad of players.
Right. Now I want to press Adam on a couple of things here, right? Because there's been some questions over the last couple of months, like when we look back to when play stopped, right? So for those dedicated viewers and listeners who've stuck with us all that time, we had questions, for example, that would you not just hand the title to Leinster? So was that straight up, was that discussed in any real way?
If that was ever going to be the case, then we would be in a much worse situation in society than we are now.
Okay.
I think that's probably the best way to, because our ambition was always to play more matches. Our ambition was to try and play 21 rounds. The longer things went on, it became very obvious you couldn't play 21 rounds. So now we'll end up with 15. We'll still get some knockout games, and then we'll get everybody back together, hopefully at the start of October, and kick off the new season.
So question number 2 is the we talked at the weekend a bit about the Premiership's approach. Did you consider, you said you didn't consider playing 21 games. How did you come to the decision to reduce it by a certain amount? What was the process?
Essentially, it just came with how many weeks have we got to play, and in what way, when does the new season start? And we normally have now, since we've expanded the top 3 in each conference get into the knockout rounds, that's gone away. So we wanted to make sure that we still had a final. Now, the final could have ended up just being the top teams from each conference. But again, the derby games give us a couple of games. They have games at meaning, even though some teams may not have a huge amount to play for. Derby games still matter for international selection, because as we'll talk later on, there's going to be a lot of international rugby played, fingers crossed, before Christmas. And these games are effectively trials games. We can't necessarily have North v South like they're going to do in New Zealand. So there's a lot hanging on that. And again, making sure that we had knockout games and a final means that you've got matches with jeopardy, something hanging on them. So that was very important. And I think what became obvious was once we got to May, we weren't going to get back on the pitch in July. And as soon as July is out the window, that's when you've got to talk about, right, we'll restrict the amount of games. So yeah, that's the route we've gone on. And also I think with the fact that we're a cross-border competition, the Derby games suits us because it doesn't push us into having to do cross-border right from the get-go, which is pretty tough at the moment.
Yeah, it buys time. It buys a little more time. And just before we leave the subject of borders, you've mentioned that South Africa is basically, we're not doing that right now. Just spell out a little more why that's the case.
So the situation in South Africa is not as good as it might be in the UK and Ireland, and good being a relative term in terms of where the pandemic is and how the virus is, just in these countries. So South Africa, they're not quite there yet in terms of having it in a safe space. And their teams have just gone back this week for training, but it's non-contact. Whereas in the UK and Ireland, training is starting to escalate for those who are already back for the last couple of weeks or the last month or more. So it's not really like they need a sustained amount of time to get ready to play games. So could be looking at September when they play their games.
Okay, watch this space.
I quite enjoyed Adam having a grilling then.
It's good, isn't it?
That was quite good. I like that. It's good seeing Redmond having a bit of heat put on him.
It's good, and not even with a fancy lamp, just quiet.
Yeah. Question 2. Yeah. I like that.
But genuinely, like, now we've got all that away. It's great to have real fixtures to look forward to. It's going to be great seeing teams run out at Aviva Stadium or wherever it will be, Paul.
Oh, and the big thing is, as much as we love watching Super Rugby in the morning, it comes a point where you can't pretend that you were born in Hamilton or that you've got an auntie in Perth, but you do have a team that you want to win in the Pro 14, and you need that. You've got to have that local connection to a team. So yeah, I can't wait for it to start. And I think the big benefit will be that all these players now are going to be fit and functioning, and hopefully without bumps. This is probably the longest rest any of them have ever had. So it's I can't wait for kickoff.
So Owain, you've been doing a bit of work, right? Because we have an ultimate 15 from the entire history of the Pro 14. There's a few names there before we get to name that whole team, right? There's a few discussions we are going to have, right? That is just going to happen. But tell us a little bit about the work behind the scenes here and what you were doing.
Well, again, I'm paid really to kind of get a few words out, shall we say. I must say before Facebook and Twitter kind of lynched me that I didn't choose the sides. I was really every day for the last 3 weeks. Adam has kind of, sent me a little message to say it's neck and neck here, or this player's, streets ahead. I mean, I was obviously playing my own little games of guessing who I thought would be in that position. So yeah, I kind of crafted, nearly 4,000 words with the kind of ultimate 15, and topped and tailed it. And it was great fun. I mean, you're a kiddie in a sweet shop, aren't you? Being able to kind of write about, these absolutely legendary players, and you can frown at some of the selections and kind of nod your head, glowingly, and think, the fans know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think the important thing to note here is this is a fan vote. So we haven't assembled the greatest minds of the people who've been there and done it to say, right, guys, let's go through the team. We've taken every player who was selected from a dream team, which comes with its own caveats. You have to play a certain amount of games. So I think we could probably all think of 1 or 2 names who might not qualify for a dream team. And then that is decided upon by the fair judgment of the media since 2006. So that's how everybody got in. And then when you put things to a public vote, sometimes you can get a Bodie McBoatface pops in, and so
I'm not sure what you're trying to say here.
We all know what is being said there. Let's get in, Jenkins. That's what I want to know.
This is where we're going, right? So we're straight in. The front row of the ultimate 15 is Dave Kilcoyne, Ken Owens, and Adam Jones. And in that number 1 spot, Paul Williams, discuss.
Well, I think Sean and I we've chatted about this before, I think Gethin Jenkins, he's the best loose head I've ever seen play. broke the mold, changed the role of what a loose head is, played loads of games in the league. Sean's won the league. How many times have you won the league, Sean? 4 times?
I forgot. There's that many. I can't remember.
Right, there we go. Right. So, Sean knows what he's talking about when it comes to stuff like that. And I think we'd all agree that Gethin Jenkins, had to be in that number 1 shirt. I mean, it's that's the Boaty McBoatface.
It's the elephant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a great player, Dave Kilcoyne. Don't get me wrong. Was it 38, 39 caps? He's got a ridiculous engine on him. I mean, he doesn't look like Keane Healy. He doesn't look like he was born in a squat rack. But Dave Kilcoyne is always. He's just his engine is a V12, and I like the way he keeps going. Because if he ever comes to my neck of the woods, and I've berated him here, I want to say that Kilcoyne is a fine player, but Gethin, as you say, the bravery he showed for the Cardiff Blues and Wales and the Lions was off the scale. Some of the kind of tackling he made and the kind of stealing the ball on the deck. He broke the mold. So full respect to Dave.
There was two votes. Well, there's a good few votes that were very, very tight. Gethin Jenkins and Dave Kilcoyne basically came down to a Twitter off between Cardiff and Munster, and so I think I concur with Owain says about Kilcoyne, but for my money and my vote, I might add, I would have put Mellon in there, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this is what Andy set this up as here. There's a lot of caveats and so on. It really depends on if there are any sort of parameters to this. Are we looking at an ultimate set of players that have graced the Guinness Pro 14 / Guinness the Pro 12, whatever, or are we picking people who have really committed and fired in the Guinness Pro 14, if you know what I mean? So, Gethin Jenkins has done wonders for Wales, wonders for the Lions, and has been a stalwart for Cardiff Blues. The Blues have never won the Celtic League, the Magners League, the Pro 12, the Guinness Pro 14. I've talked about Alan Jacobson at Edinburgh before, and Marcus Horan of Munster, but Dave Kilcoyne is a recent, and he's very much in the forefront of younger Munster fans now. So, and we're going to have this issue right the way through. But overall, the amount of seasons that Gethin did play, and the amount of games he would have played in spite of his international career in the Pro 14 would have been right up there, I would imagine. So yeah, he would get my vote as well. Just a bit, what Duncan Jones, Paul James. There's only 5 Ospreys in this Ultimate 15. It's ridiculous. It's scandalous.
Did you want the whole 15?
Well, there's an argument.
No, I totally agree with you.
We could make an argument. I like Kyle Reese's argument, not just because I'm Welsh, but because Gethin is the only prop I've ever seen to overtake his own winger to catch the opposing winger and tackle him.
There you go. That kind of sums it up.
That's very true. And you've also got to say, you've got Yestin Thomas, was a fine player. I think he won a couple of Dream Team awards. Rob Evans, brilliant. Big Dennis Buckley. There's some brilliant players who haven't even made the possibles and the probables that Adam kindly put together for us. So, again, it just shows you just what quality there's been over the years, doesn't it?
Yeah. This could be a long pod.
Oh, yeah. We could go through the night.
I think when you look at that other, it's Sean's got a different view to me. I'm a bit of a fan favorite. Ken Owens, he's just a good bloke as well as what he does. He's packed down at number 8 for Scarlets, which I think is a nice little bit of trivia. But then again, like hookers in the Pro 14 and the history, the hookers are like, guys like Sean Cronin as well. Jerry Flannery was very close in the running here. Scotland's had a great run of really good hookers, and it's a bit disappointing we don't have a Scotsman in the team, but it's hard. Yeah, Rory Best, of course.
Yeah, Rory
Matthew Rees, yeah. But Ken is, I think most people would agree with Ken getting the nod, but the quality is so good at hooker, it's hard to say who's the most deserving.
Yeah. Ken Owens is solid. We can have debates around the fringes, but we're okay with that. Yeah. Dave Kilcoyne won the Twitter off. That's fine. Adam Jones, I'm okay with that. Into the locks, Paul O'Connell, Alan Wynne Jones. Are there any realistic contenders there to step into either one of those pairs of giant shoes?
I'll take this. No.
Well, again, it goes back to the credentials. I think you look at somebody like Leo Cullen.
Yeah.
And I spoke to Leo on behalf of Guinness Pro 14. There's a guy who we didn't like coming up against. Here's a guy who was big feet, nasty, never smiled, and was a nasty bugger in and around the rucks. But he was always there because he was, because of the other guys who were in the Ireland team, he was always ever present. He went on to lead them. He's been involved in titles. He's added value in a very different way to Pro 14, Pro 12 rugby. He's now coaching the best side in the tournament. So there's somebody like him. Mal Kelly played for years. You talk about somebody like Nathan Hines, who played for at least two Guinness Pro 14 teams, Edinburgh and Leinster. So yeah, there are arguments. Nakawara has lit it up in recent years, as has Tyg Byrne. But I think if it comes down to it, in terms of perennial consistency performances, in spite again of international rugby, and in their early years would have donned their shirts throughout the Celtic League, it'd be Paulie and Alan Wynne, wouldn't it?
Yeah. See, that's why it's so interesting having Sean's opinion on all that, because we tend to just, as fans, look at it on the top level, don't we? Who's the best name? Who are the Lions? Who are the best players? But of course, from a coaching perspective, you wouldn't have seen Paul O'Connell that much. Do you know what I mean? He was he was away with Ireland an awful lot. So it's interesting when you say about Leo Cullen, because he played virtually all season, didn't he? How many Ireland caps did he have? Few and far between.
Not enough.
Yeah.
I just say that for anybody who's played any sort of rugby, if you see Paul O'Connell and Alan Wynne Jones on the team opposing you, you're going to go, oh Christ, because the leadership, vacuum without those two. I mean, we've got a side there with massive experience, but just those two, I've interviewed both of them. They are just sheer competitors, aren't they? They are the sort of guys you do not want to meet on the dark alley late at night. They'll absolutely munch you up. So
yeah, I always remember Adam Jones telling me once that in the Welsh squad, if ever they were in trouble or things were going wrong, you just look towards Alan Wynne, regardless of going forwards or backwards. It was just what are we doing then? And then he'd get it sorted.
Yeah, so the two runners up were named there, Leonie Nakarawa and Tyg Byrne. I'm a big fan of Tyg Byrne. But Tyg Byrne, you've got a massive recency bias there, my friend.
Yes.
There's a lot of big names that have been around the league a long time, and well done.
Yeah, very good. I think the Nakarawa one is a good shout. Glasgow Warriors fans certainly will think of that, and he's a difference maker. But again, it's how do you look past those two totems who they are British and Irish Lions to the core. It's very difficult. The back row, I want to open this up because I think the back row throughout the course of the history of the tournament has just produced a lot of special players. And there's so many we could talk about who don't get in here, but the guys who did get in, any major qualms, Owen?
What I like about that back row is I think it's got a real balance. I think you've got a very stereotypical six and Omani. You can chuck him up at the back. Same with Justin Tipuric. But Peter Omani again, he's very vocal. He's a Lions captain, first test, 2017, and he's got that snarl about him. He's got that edge that I think annoys opposing fans. But if you're a Munster man, or an Ireland fan, you absolutely love him because he empties himself. I was out in the squall. Was it 2017 when England had this kind of 17-game winning run, and the performance he put in there? When, if I'm honest, he was under a bit of pressure. It got him out to the Lions, didn't it? He's just a sheer competitor, and I'm sure I can kind of hand you over to Sean to talk about Justin Tipuric's kind of skills before we go into Jamie.
Well, I think Tips he's one of the modern day internationals that continues fronting up for his team. Yeah. So he does play a lot for the Ospreys, and he performs in the Guinness Pro 14. So I'm not surprised. He's the sort of player that it's not just Welsh people have voted for, You know, he's seen by all the other nations supporters, I would imagine, as an absolute quality performer. So, and in stiff competition, he is head and shoulders in my view. You know, I look at, I think as much as I love Sam is again in this selection a questionable selection as the second fiddle, because he wouldn't have played very often in the league. I would have gone for something like Shane Jennings. You know, somebody like him performed perennially for Leinster. Again, coming up against him as a coach, a pain in the backside. So players like that, and then you could list a load. You know, so it's a tough one like that. But typically, there's no qualms.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Jennings. He was, you know, in my reporting days doing the Leinster beat. If you got Geno, win, lose or draw post-match, you knew you were going to get somebody who was not the most excited person to be facing a bunch of dictaphones and microphones, but he could come out with some absolute gold. And they came in after winning a game that was tight one night, and so we said, "Oh, you must be happy to get the win." No, that was shit. That was just not good enough. You know what I mean? And it was like, you know, like, don't know what game you guys are watching, but that's, you know, and he just went off on one. And then he got to the end of it and he went, "That'll give you something to write about tomorrow, won't it, lads?"
Nice.
Yeah.
And I think just to kind of jump in about six, because we've obviously talked about the kind of, we've lauded, you know, Peter O'Mahony's talents, but the players that have been kind of overlooked there, Jerry Collins, Rocky Hudson, you know, Ryan Jones, Simon Easterby, Sean O'Brien won it at 6. You know, Alessandro Zanni, Dan Levy. My God, at 6, that is some feather in the cap, isn't it, for Peter O'Mahony?
Yeah,
you know, to beat some of those players to that 6 shirt, something else.
And then you think like Philo Tia, who wasn't probably nominated in that position, but you think of guys like that as well. You know, unbelievable.
Yeah. I'm gonna just give you one on the number 8 there. So. There was a good few guys, about 25 plus, maybe 30 guys who were in the dream team more than once. Owain Jones was the most selections, 6 times he's been in the dream team. But Jamie Heaslip, 5 times. And that's a guy who consistently played for Ireland, consistently played for the Lions pretty much. He just, you know, it's ironic that his career ended with injury, because he spent his whole career never being injured, which I think is probably why he's got in there. Maybe ahead of Owen, probably some more ball-playing boys at the back of the scrum.
In terms of big carriers, Heaslip was more of a, you wouldn't build your back row around Heaslip's skills, even though he's going to go down as an all-time great number 8, because he was multifaceted. So if you had a big carrier at 6, he could do the bits and pieces at 8. If you needed him to carry at 8, he could do that. But he could just do a bit of everything, which must have been an absolute blessing for a coach to have the luxury of picking someone like that.
Yeah, he just looked intelligent there. I say he may have been faking it, but the hair was hardly ever out of place, was it? He almost never looked flustered, and he played a lot in the wide channels. You know, you'd often see him popping up, and I guess some of the purists would say, "What's he doing out there?" But if you look at Kieran Reid and Talupi Falato, you know, he was ahead of the game. You know, his reading of the game was always, I thought, you know, a few steps ahead of a lot of other kind of bashers and crashers at the back. So I think that back row's got a really nice balance to it, actually.
So let's go into the backs, right? So the backs we have, I think we're going to go fairly confidently at 9 that Ruan Pienaar is a good representative of an all-time great in this championship. Have I any contenders to seriously discuss for that title?
Mike Phillips is probably closest, would you say?
Well, only because, again, I keep going back to this. Mike Phillips played for 3 teams, you know, across 10 years in this tournament. So what are you looking for? He's won the title with the Ospreys, in 2010. But, you know, played as a teenager for the Scarlets, came through there, played for the Cardiff Blues for a number of seasons, and then played for the Ospreys, and has donned 3 shirts in this tournament. So, and an international player, a Lions player, you know, you're talking about a guy who's right up there. Ruan Pienaar, unquestionable, the talent, you know, what a player.
World Cup winner. World Cup winner, Sean.
But that's not the Guinness Pro 14, is it? So are
That's
we,
the thing, isn't it?
Played.
Are we-
I know. But
are we going to pick? Are we going to pick all the best players in the world that ever played a couple of games in the Guinness Pro 14? If so, we then
But
go
James-
for an argument, you know.
Well, in fairness to
James
Rumpina, Sean, in fairness to Rumpina,
John Ryan's a tight there on the bench. David Kilcoyne. You're talking about Rumpina and David Kilcoyne in the same breath.
This is good.
No, Rumpina. Hang on, Rumpina. This is Rumpina played week in, week out. For the 5 years he was at Ulster, he was week in, week out. He was there in the big days. He was there on the days when nobody was looking, and there was internationals on the weekend.
I'm with you.
He kicked his goals. He played 9. He played 10.
And 10. Yeah, that's the big thing I think with Pina.
He was as big a part of Ulster becoming a contender. They never got over the line. They lost in the final, and they lost in many semi-finals. But he had a massive impact on those guys, and subsequently a massive impact on the Ulster players who went in to play for Ireland. So, I'm with you on Mike Phillips. Mike Phillips is a one-of-a-kind scrum half, and I think that's, he kind of forged a way for scrum halves. I think to go away from the nippy, sniping scrum half, he was the guy who could do it all. He could go one-on-one with the box. It's difficult to say Ruan Pienaar is a popular choice.
I mean, no, I'm not. I think Ruan Pienaar is a good choice, and you've really stated exactly why he should be picked. There's not many other contenders that you could say have those credentials. Mike Phillips is one, as Owain says, but I still think Ruan Pienaar, is a suitable choice.
So can I just drop in something strange here? That this was one that jumped out at me. That the runner-up 9 in this was Nico Matawalu. Now, I love Nico Matawalu.
No,
I love him, but there's no way.
We swear Gareth Davis, but yeah, I mean, Nico Matawalu is heart in your mouth sort of 9, isn't he?
And he's a wing more than anything.
He can do your heads in your hands. He's loose as a goose. Nico Matawalu at 9. Wow.
He's box office. If you're going out to your local ground to watch your team play Nico's team, I'm in, right?
Yeah.
Because anything can happen and it's gonna be fun. But he's just not here. This is weird. Adam, I'd love to see the voting on this one.
No, that reeks of like Russian interference.
I was just thinking that.
Again, he's in your ultimate 15. If the criteria is you want to see an attractive, open, who knows what's going to happen 15, then Matawalu's going to be in there.
Yeah. Listen. I've heard about Mike Phillips on a night out. I'd say he's attractive and open, and
that's the ultimate 15. They would be all Ospreys.
Yeah,
they would be all Ospreys.
Ronan O'Gara at 10. This is going to be an interesting one because he did play a lot in the championship, but he's also a giant name in the game. Dan Biggar was the runner-up here. I can see a few players in this one.
Right, hang on. Sean Holley, not allowed to speak about this because I probably agree with him. I would maybe opt for Dan Biggar, but let's let Paul and Owain lead the chat here, I'd say.
But I think with all of these selections, it's whether people pick them on their test reputation, don't they? Which is where the O'Gara things come from. I'd say in the league, I would have Dan Biggar there. It's difficult for Sean because they're almost blood relations. So, I think in terms of what he's done at the Ospreys, and I would have had Biggar there, and I know I'm Welsh, but then again, the same thing with O'Gara, and they're such different players as well. Really, it's tricky. I'd have gone with Biggar, but then the Welsh bias thing would be thrown in.
What I loved with Biggar is he just came in at 18, hit match-winning kicks from the touchline, nerves of steel, played it. Clearly was an intelligent guy. He didn't just rely on his skill sets and stuff. I think he was he's just one of the most exciting guys as a youngster, but also because he played with the consistency of a guy who was in his mid to late 20s.
Yes, and
from the get-go.
And I think that the thing that people don't realise a lot about Dan Biggar because I'm from Swansea, so they're my home region. Dan Biggar didn't always have it easy from supporters when he was at the Ospreys. Sometimes people used to think he kicked too much, and then he'd get, I think that's the reason he never really went on to social media. He was never on Twitter. And I remember once going to a kit launch when he was booed by some, admittedly, a very small number of Osprey supporters. So I don't think people realise, how hard he's battled sometimes to get through, and he's always excelled, and he's always proved people wrong, and he's always succeeded. Whereas Ronan O'Gara was always the darling, really, wasn't he, at Munster? It was always, he was always the marquee player. So Dan Biggar, he's a real fighter, that boy.
Yeah,
I'm only allowed to say one thing, and it's a question. Who's the all-time leading point scorer?
Dan Biggar, Ospreys.
2,300 points, isn't he?
Oh, look at all.
Do you know who's going to over? Do you know who's likely to overtake him by the end of next season? Ian Keatley.
Yes. Yeah.
I was going to say Matawala then.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling Dan Biggar may yet kick points in the Pro 14.
Yeah.
Pro, whatever we
You
are.
heard it here first.
I think with Rog, before we're all accused of kind of Welsh bias, is that, again, certainly on the international stage and with Munster, he had that kind of, he could give the chops back, couldn't he? He was a typical 10. He didn't have a bad little fend for not a kind of big fella, but you'd always see him shouting instructions. He was a general, wasn't he? Really, at 10, he would murder opposition packs, but he knew exactly when to kick. He'd kick for the corners. He'd play the possession game, and he would frustrate opposing. He'd almost play in the whole bit like a quarterback, didn't he? He wasn't playing too flat to the line because he knew he didn't have the bulk sometimes to bust tackles. But you don't win 129 caps without being a very very player.
Can we and if you want to really just have a happy daydream, think about a Ronan O'Gara with the 50-22 rule.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh my God!
It came over.
Imagine being the opposition pack with that in front of you. Right. We're going to go controversially into the centres first and then the back three. Right. Darcy and O'Driscoll. Them both getting in. We shouldn't be surprised, but yet weirdly I was still surprised that they both got in. The runners up here, I'm just going to tell people, were John Davies at 12 and Nick Grigg at 13. Sean, you don't have as much skin in this game.
Well, I do because I go back to 2003. That the start of it, if you like. We had a Celtic League prior to that, but I can remember back in 03 or 4 or 5, Darcy playing at 15, at 14, at 12, stepping in at 10. Prior to his international career, he was on the fringe of the squad then. And he was the bane of our lives because he was such a talented player. So to me, again, he's added value to the league. I think I said to you in my 10 years at the Ospreys, Brian O'Driscoll only ever played against us once, I believe, down at Swansea, a 20 points to 3 win for the Ospreys. But I don't remember much about it. But so again, I go back to this criteria. No one's questioning O'Driscoll's absolute quality. What a player. One of the best players ever to grace the game. Unbelievable player. And so if it is an ultimate 15 of guys who have graced the Pro 14, then yeah, he's in. But for me, Darcy has more of a legitimate call on a number of other criteria than O'Driscoll. But you can't question the pairing. They were phenomenal, and they played so well together and for so long together.
Well, and almost to justify their inclusion, I did an ad hoc poll the other day because I watched some clips of Nonu and Conrad Smith. And I did a little poll, who are the best centre combinations in pro rugby, right? So I had Conrad, Nonu, O'Driscoll, Darcy, De Villiers, and Jacques Fauré. And, to be included in that 3 shows how good they were. There are lots of good, like Gibbs and Bateman and those guys didn't even come close. Those were in the top 3 pairs that have played together. So I
Carlin
think
and Gusgood?
I didn't put them in because they were pre-pro.
You can only choose 4, can't you, on Twitter? So
yeah. You can only, so I didn't put any. So but that I think that shows the regard that people put them in.
Would have been. Oh, and you wouldn't have had much to write about with these two.
Well, again, I had reams to write about. I mean, what I'd said is that it's funny for Gordon Darcy. He was a brilliant player. And he's a good bloke, really intelligent guy, one of the smartest guys that I've kind of interviewed and kind of done a column with. But because he played with that once in a generation player in Brian Driscoll, he's always seen maybe as the kind of, he kind of underrated, I guess, in Wales a little bit because he played against the Bod, who was a kind of the favourite of YouTube and getting hundreds of thousands of hits. One of the other point in the midfield is that John Davis was down there as a 12 because I think he won in 2011, 12. Because again, in a bit of a mishmash with the Scarlets because they had Regan King, didn't they, play, and Scott Williams, and obviously Hadley Park. So I think for most people they see him as a 13. I think for a lot of people, well, like 12, he's a 13 certainly for Wales. I don't know what anybody else thought about. Certainly he'd be one centre who would have certainly been in that argument for certainly a place there. What he did with the Scarlets. Again, he has played plenty for the Scarlets, and he just doesn't on an international level.
You had your hand slapped here from Howell Davis, one of our listeners, Williams. He's gone, no Little and Horan, ?
They were the fourth option.
All right. But you couldn't get in on Twitter.
No, Paul.
They were the fourth. But people voted for O'Driscoll and Darcy above those two. But like you say, that's probably a recency bias.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, guys, look, I think the main thing to remember here, because I know Holly's blood is really, really up. This is a fan vote. And that's why it's a good talking point. But
well,
I don't think we're going to hand out. We're not going to hand out medals for this.
It's nice
hold on.
isn't it?
I want to defend the fans on this, right? Because the fans don't actually get the proper vote here. Because firstly, you're restricted with the number of games you have to play on a Dream Team season. Then you've got media voting on top of that. There's a lot going on before the fans even get there, right? As Adam takes his required sup of Guinness during the podcast.
Yeah. I like seeing Sean
calling out on that.
It's good when Holly's animated.
It is. Grumpy Sean is great. I love it.
Grumpy Sean,
I'm not grumpy. I'm not grumpy tonight. I was grumpy on Saturday. I'm not grumpy tonight.
Producer Adam dug me out some of the voting here. So just to let you know, in the 12 channel, Darcy finished top by a nose, 22% to Davies on 20, and then Bod was 63%, Greg 8%, and Bundy Aki 7%.
63% for Bod.
It's a bit of a gap, isn't it? Yeah, big name.
That's
right,
that's
back
not
three.
Just Irish fans voting, but there you go. Back three. Here we go.
Back three. I'm okay with this.
I don't think you can dispute the back three.
Shane Williams at 11, Tommy Bowe 14, Ethan Atewa 15. The runners up, Stuart Hogg 15. Yeah, Tommy Seymour 14. James Lowe, recency bias. Great player, but recency bias at 11.
Yeah.
Any other names we're missing from that?
Owen, I'd say the guy who's really, really unlucky to miss out here is Tim Visser, who made the Dream Team 4 times and doesn't get in on either wing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
He was a wonderful try score, a little bit like Tom Varndell over in the Premiership, but I think some people could say he wasn't the complete player. And Tommy Bowe, he's just, everyone loves Tommy, don't they? He's such a graceful runner. And he can play at 15 for yard 2 and he can hit the lines. And Shane again is probably one of the most talented players I've ever seen live. I remember, I think it was back in 2006, and he beat Drew Mitchell in a standing start. Hardly any player can beat their opposing winner on a standing start. I just think, how can you do that? Some of the stuff I saw Shane Williams do in the flesh was quite remarkable. But I think one player we haven't mentioned at all or two actually is Liam Williams and Lee Byrne. For a time, Lee Byrne was out of this world. I'm sure Sean will tell you. And Liam Williams again is worthy of being in any conversation, isn't he?
Yeah, and and another player who wouldn't fall into this, but would fall in to sort of Sean's bracketing would be someone like Dan Evans at the Ospreys, who really has contributed to the league massively at 15, for the Ospreys. And it's tricky, but I wouldn't argue with any of the players in that back three.
Issa for me is a shoe-in again because I like versatility. He played across the board, kicked goals when he needed to, when Leinster didn't have a goal kicker. Has won it multiple times. So come back. You know, like George Foreman when he came back and then won it again. So for me, he says a shoe in, as is Shane, because he's won the title 4 times, and even played, I believe, in the 2002 Celtic Cup final for Nice. So I mean, again, you're somebody who's a stalwart of the competition, and Tommy's done it for 2 teams at the highest level. I can't argue with the fans on the back 3. I think it's a real good choice.
I give you one final step. Well, Tommy's the only player who got into the dream team playing for 2 teams who made it into this. Tyg Byrne is the only other player who's gotten to a dream team, being for Scarlets and for Munster. But just the final stat before we kind of end this element of the conversation: 1,333 international test caps, and if you consider the fact that Ethan Asay had an unfortunate 1 cap at international career, that stunted things.
That's incredible.
Pretty impressive haul.
It's pretty good. But speaking
what's that
of
per player? Is that 85? What's that? How many? What's that divided by 15? Is anyone good enough at maths to do that on the top?
Get your calculator.
we can do that. We can't. Owen can't do it now because we have to let Owen go. Because Owen has to go see a trophy being lifted. That's what's happening tonight, folks. Live as we speak.
4-3, so I'm going to have a very nervy 20 minutes, but we've won it. But thank you ever so much for having me, all chaps. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll buy myself my own little light if I'm ever offered to come on again, because I'm going to soon.
Good to see you, Owen.
Thanks again, lads. All the best.
Ta-da.
Good to see you, mate.
Bye-bye.
See, I enjoy chats like that, Adam, because that's part of the crack of just with your mates in the pub, or just.
Oh, completely. I'm just trying to settle Holly down a little bit. He's just.
I'll give you. No, don't. No. Wind him up. Let him go. It's great.
I love his stats. Oh, he's so great for that. He is a proper stato. His knowledge of players and statistics, fantastic.
I get a bit animated because I know my mates down the pub would be saying similar things, about. Well, what's the criteria then? We all Lord Brian O'Driscoll, but I've had these. Can you imagine the conversations I've had? So the team has come out to play Munster on Saturday. I go for a pint on a Thursday, and all 6 of my best mates are Osprey fans. They're giving me, why have you picked him and him? And why have you picked him? What are you doing? What are you thinking? And I'm thinking, Jesus, I have to justify myself again on a Thursday night over a pint. Bloody hell! I'm just having a day of this, telling players, well, they're not playing.
Well, do you know what? I'll throw up the alternative 15, and we can have a quick look at that. But you do know that I'm a big fan of my stats and stuff, and I'll run through some of the ones I thought. The team has 4 players who are test captains for the Lions, and I think that's incredible. And also Ken Owens captained the Lions on tour, but not in a test match. So you could say 5. But Brian O'Driscoll, Paul O'Connell, Peter O'Mahony, Owain Jones. I mean, when you consider, the incredible leaders that England have produced over the last 20 years, I mean, that's a feather in the cap. I think that the 1,300 caps is something pretty amazing. Just to go on the Stuart Hogg bit, he's probably the unluckiest player not to get in. He lost out by 21 votes.
Oh, love him.
Which is pretty harsh. And again, it's like we're splitting hairs here, guys. The quality of players. And this
that'll
really
teach him for signing for Exeter. I bet if he'd stayed, he'd have got those 21.
It's a credit to the league, though, isn't it, that you have those players that have played in the league, and so many more that we haven't mentioned. We're very lucky in the Guinness Pro 14 to have such talent.
And the last little stat that myself and Owen actually, we had a little email back and forth because I thought I had my stats wrong, or maybe he'd overlooked something. There's 7 players in the team who'd captained their country, and we had both got 1 wrong because I thought, is it 8? So he'd forgotten about Rog. He thought he had forgotten that Rog had captained Ireland, but he had made the same assumption that I had, that Ken Owens had captained Wales in a game. Ken Owens has not captained Wales
really?
As a starter. Yeah,
Wow.
That, I wouldn't have known that.
which I find flabbergasting.
Because I thought he'd taken over for a couple of games. Well, there we go. Anyway, that's not surprising.
Yeah,
I got something
hopefully,
wrong.
anybody who's watching, anyone who's watching at the moment, because if you're listening, you can't tell us when we're wrong. Well, I mean, you can write a nasty tweet to us. We totally encourage that.
Don't do that.
But if you're
I'm
listening,
tired
you think
and
I'm wrong
emotional.
on Ken Owens, do let us know. Do let us know. I will throw up the alternatives, and then we can go on to talking about the rest of rugby and Paul's upcoming column as well tomorrow. Here's your runners up versus the Ultimate 15, and Sean, which one of those two teams do you want to coach?
Or either. I think the Ultimate
Sean,
15,
I'm not paying you to sit on the fence here. Come on.
not sitting on the fence. Look, always back self-interest, I say. So I'm going with the Ultimate 15 because you've got try scorers galore. Line breaks galore. How many goal kickers do you want? Pina, O'Gara, Nastiwa. We might have a interesting battle in the front row. Gethin Jenkins, Jerry, and John Ryan. You've got offloading danger in the back row with Bill Matt and Nakawara, but we've got
I've got
15,
yeah,
we've got
I'm the ball, are they? Let's face it.
I'm coming in here now. If I'm a fan, right, coming down to the game, and there's a lot going on with that runners up, right? You've got Hoggy, you got John Davis, James Lowe, you've got Nico, whatever's going to happen yourself, Madawala with 9. You've got Nakarawa and Tyg Byrne and Bill Mata taking ball on. You've got CJ Stander running up. This is there's a lot going on in that runners up 15. I could sell a lot of tickets with that 15.
Yeah, I think the runners up team would be dangerous in the last 20 offloading.
We will have wrapped the game up by then.
You'd be up by 40.
If you have the jumper, we'd be mauling. Right, we'd be slowing the clock down. I'll have all the boys doing their shoelaces up to waste time. Yeah, we'll have it in the bag.
And you'd have
Could you imagine the
50-22. You'd have all just pinging balls into corners.
Park the best.
Could you imagine the chat between O'Connell and Alan Wynne about if you let any of those effers offload, you're dead. Don't even come into the dressing room at half time. Yeah. It'd be some serious things. I think to round this off, guys, let's have a little bit of the comments that we've had coming in. So we're not going to go to Kyle Reese, who's asking about the ultimate head coach, defense coach, and back coach, because I think he's trying to point to Paul there. I thought this was an interesting one from Sean Van Staden. Pierre Schoeman reminds me of Oz Duran playing style. Schoeman, and we're talking about recency bias. He was in the running for the Reese heads, and we didn't even mention him. He's been a force since he came into the tournament as well. And then we had Howell Davis obviously asking about Little and Horn. This is one, someone says they would have put Jared Payne at 15. Jared Payne is the kind of guy who you're going to put him in there. He's not going to make mistakes, and he's going to have all the little touches for everyone else. And that's why Joe Schmidt put him straight in there to succeed Brian O'Driscoll, because he moved him from fullback into outside centre. But was he a blow you away player?
Hang on, is that the real Shane Williams?
It is Shane the River Williams. That's him. As you can see the picture, there's his lovely wife and children. Lovely that you're tuning in, River. Thanks very much. Who chose the wingers? It was the fans, mate. You're the fans' favourite. But Tommy,
hang on, he was the media darling, and he's the fans' favourite.
Yeah.
And I think Owain just had pure love coming out from there as well. So that was that's really good. That's really good.
Thanks for tuning in, mate.
Happy days. And we got a Hoggy comment. Yeah, Scottish. Also Watson comments all Welsh.
This really struck me looking at it though, because I know that through the years there's been a lot of Scottish and Welsh success in the championship, and there's a lot of Ospreys in there because Ospreys had a lot of success in the championship, but there's also sort of the fan base of the teams to consider as well. So if you've got hordes of Munster fans and loads of Ospreys fans and loads of Leinster fans, that's different than some of the fan bases elsewhere in the league, and it's
Yeah.
maybe that came into some of this.
Yeah.
You know,
Shane, welcome on the pod anytime if you want to talk.
I've got to
through
say,
the
I don't
great
care about
moments.
anything now because Shane Williams is listening and he's one of my favourite players. So that's it now for me.
That's you gone now. You need to go to
Paul
the
needs a
pub.
moment. Paul definitely needs a moment. Right.
Judy Brims is very vociferous tonight, isn't she? We've got Hoggy, Scottish, also Watson, comments, all Welsh Irish. Well, you just covered that, Andy. But Hamish Watson, what a great player.
Oh.
He is fantastic, and it's great to see Edinburgh in particular this year unearthing fellas like Schoeman, Duan van der Merwe. Crikey, these guys are going to be eligible for Scotland coming up. And they've got some great young second rows coming through in Scottish rugby. So, even though they've had some barren times in terms of winning the tournament, they are, Glasgow have been there. But Edinburgh and the Cockers are really pushing. Glasgow are thereabouts. And with all this it's bought some time for this young talent to come through. So Magnus Bradbury, we mentioned before, we've got a lot of talent and good overseas sprinkling in there now to help. Who knows? Next couple of years, we could be talking all Scotland, which would be great. It would be really great.
And when you're chatting about Hamish Watson, there's a legit British Lion option now. I think other than RD Sevilla, I can't think of a better pound per pound carrier.
Combative, yeah.
Oh my God! After the tackle.
Tackles.
He's unbelievable because he's not the biggest of guys. He's not like 6'5" and a man mountain. He's just powerful. Breaks tackles for fun.
Do you know what? And that will be a nice segue to move off because you have described this next man that we will chat about in your column tomorrow on pro14.rugby. Check it out from around 8 a.m. You described this man as having two legs similar to a freshly put up. What do you want to call it? A kebab stick?
Yeah, those lamb doner kebab sticks.
Yeah,
Taniela Tupo.
The ones that when you're in the kebab shop at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're looking at them glistening just before the guy starts shearing off that natural looking meat.
In Swansea, they call him the elephant leg. I'll have elephant leg and chips. But yeah, Taniela Tupo. So he's the Queensland Red tight head. Unbelievable performance. And we chatted about him on the pod last weekend, actually. I think he's going to be the next Tag Furlong in terms of mold breaking. We chatted about Gethin Jenkins earlier, breaking that loose head mold. And I think Tupo is going to do that. His scrummaging is amazing, which is what they worried about. They thought he's all going to be about big flashy carries and power. But as I wrote in the column, now he's moving scrums back 1.5 meters, and then in the next play, sidestepping somebody by 1.5 meters. And the biggest thing is he's playing for 80 minutes, which I can't really think of any tight heads who can function at that level for 80 minutes. So he's the real deal.
Yeah, what was the comment on that came through after we talked about him on the pod? It said he's a real deal against Australian teams.
Do you know what? I put that in the column, actually. I said some of the crueler people on social media were saying that, in the Australian conference, he isn't coming up against South African props and Kiwis. And that is true. But,
we will look forward to that.
That's part of the development of a tight head, though, You think back to Kyle Sinclair, who's of a similar mold, maybe.
Yes.
Has struggled with his temperament and discipline, but is pulling it together. And Tupo could be one that blossoms. Look at Adam Jones. It took him a long time to establish himself in international rugby. John Hayes played some of the best rugby in the latter part of his career consistently. So, you're right to single him out. There's a couple coming through behind the front liners in Kiwi rugby as well. So it's great, isn't it? It's those guys that we've mentioned have made front row play sexy. You can earn a good living. You can have a big part in the game. I think Kyle Sinclair, if he can control himself, is just a shoe-in for the Lions. Sorry, Irish fans, but he's more dynamic. If he can front up physically against the Bockers, he'll give Tig a real run for his money in the 3 shirt.
Yeah,
we're
Paul, we may have just in case Tig is watching, like Shane is watching. We'll just we'll just leave this up there. Maybe we'll get some comments in.
Can we take that
and again,
quickly, in case Tag is watching?
Well, he'll definitely appreciate being called Tag when his name is Tig, but yeah.
It'll just come up in the comments. You said my name wrong, and I'll fill you in.
Hold on.
But you know what?
This is very brave of Adam in a league where we have people who contact us in the comment section from places in Wales to challenge anyone about pronunciation, my friend.
Yeah.
Not my forte. Not my forte.
Yeah,
we're all here to help each other.
I always pronounce that name wrong. Tig. I always say Tag.
We're going to move on slightly, but related to this. So we've talked about rugby in the Southern Hemisphere. We talk about it every week. If you join us for the watch-alongs of Super Rugby Aotearoa, and we have done for well, I didn't. The rest of you did for Australia. I was on another week off.
That again.
Yeah, but Super Rugby Aotearoa has been great. But today there was an announcement from World Rugby about the test calendar. So we talked about our more local club fixtures earlier on. South Africa will not be hosting any home tests in 2020, it seems, because World Rugby have said we're going to have a temporary international window between the 24th of October and the 5th of December. At least they've recommended it. And this will involve two different windows. In the Southern Hemisphere, it seems that they're going to play a single country tournament, which I think we're almost certainly is going to be based in some kind of bubble in New Zealand, where the other nations go over there. And up here, up north, what we think is going to happen is we finish off the last 2 weekends of the Six Nations. And then let's be frank, to get the money in, we have some more test games against a combination of Northern Hemisphere opposition and potentially a team makeup of Pacific Island players who are based up here with their clubs. That's what we think is happening. Adam, anything from the inside there?
No, I think we're kind of looking at that, and it's I suppose everybody in the club organisation side of it has been like waiting for the international shoe to drop to kind of flesh out those plans. But I mean, I think these plans have been on the wall internally probably for at least 6 weeks to 2 months. There was lots of different ideas. I know we were at one stage, someone was talking about potentially playing a World Cup or a fake World Cup, whatever it was. But look, it's that's the challenge that we've got. The guys from the Southern Hemisphere can't come up. If I was in New Zealand, I wouldn't want to leave and go anywhere else in the world, particularly if I was a rugby fan. And I think what would be interesting now, I'd love to know, is what's the process for a tourist to get into New Zealand? How much have they upped the fees for the paperwork? And I definitely think it's worth every single penny if you could go down for 6 weeks for the Rugby Championship and tour about New Zealand and watch all these games. I think that sounds, if that comes to fruition, that sounds like it'd be brilliant.
Do you know, the one thing I think we need to do when we chat about all this is not make the word money sound dirty. Because when I hear people chat about, all this now and all these fixtures, oh, it's all about the money, just for the money, just for the money. Like rugby. No, but rugby needs money.
I know.
It's
we Paul, you're so right. Like we've talked about this through lockdown.
Yeah.
If we don't keep money in the game, there will be no game. Clubs will fold. Unions will fold. There will be no game.
Last week on Twitter, there were so many people saying, "Oh, why do we need to play internationals now this season?" If you can't grasp why we need to play them, like just the basic knowledge of like rugby and professional sport, that's a worry. And I probably wouldn't comment on Twitter if that's how you feel. Like, money isn't a dirty word in professional sport. It is what the game is about. So, the next 12 months is all about getting money in to make sure rugby survives.
I think Paul's the nail on the head there. Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
I'm just a touch confused. The way I read it, as Andy said, the 24th of October to the 5th of December is a window, right, for us up here. So we finish off the Six Nations, then they're advocating a rest weekend on the 7th of November.
Seems to be, yeah.
Think
And
so,
then,
yeah.
and then playing what we would know normally as autumn internationals.
Autumn
But-
internationals, but without the big teams, the big three from the southern
because
hemisphere.
they're playing in the Rugby
Correct.
Championship.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, isn't it? Who are the teams going to play? If crowds are allowed back in by then, will they be attractive enough to get people in and generate the money that you're talking about, Paul, the revenue?
Yeah.
We're so used to in November, December playing New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, that it may work against us. However, we do need rugby. And does it then, even though it's more rugby, does it then quash the season? Adam, maybe you can help here, because by then I would imagine all the domestic competitions will be having to up and run and fit in a new season. Would that be right?
Yeah, look, the plans at the moment for us are to kick off the very first weekend in October. So I think that's the 3rd of October. So yeah, and this is a season that's going to pile straight into another Six Nations in 21, and then into a Lions tour. This is going to present a lot of challenges around player welfare and around availability of players for nations and clubs and stuff like that. Might be less problematic for Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. It will be a challenge in England, no doubt, given the nature of the landscape there. So, yeah, if you're a big name player as well, you need some club games to get into form.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like when you talk about, we usually talk about bolters for the Lions coming from the Six Nations, who's just got onto the international radar. I wonder if we'll end up seeing bolters from the Lions maybe not even have played in the Six Nations, because actually I think some guys could end up in a category where they basically will only play international rugby over the next 9 months.
Yeah.
And what will happen is when one of those guys drops out, the next best guy could rip it up at club level.
Yeah, spot on. And my immediate concern was thinking of looking at all these fixtures and knowing the domestics are in as well. Money comes into this, Paul, because let's make no bones about it. Lockdown, COVID will have affected the income streams of the professional teams, regions, provinces. If you're looking at a condensed season with a lot of internationals, you're going to be without a lot of your international players. Therefore, you need bigger squads, more players, which cost money. They're already on pay cuts. So it opens a can of worms for all of the management and the teams of how they can afford that, and it may be that we'll see some, dare I say, from a Welsh point of view, semi-pro players, academy players being elevated quite quickly, and that might be a good thing.
That's the thing, because it could, like you always say, with coaching, whatever happens, you've got to look to the positive and see how you can get around that. It might be, it brings through an entire generation of players.
Which we've been crying out for. Look at Leinster, how successful they are. It works, So forgive the phrase, but we might see the end of some dead wood in a lot of squads. You know what I mean? And these youngsters given a go.
I think if you're 23 under in the UK and Ireland, this could be a very exciting prospect for you this year. Because do you know what? You may not get an international cap. You may not become a Lion. But you know what? You may get yourself a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract when in other circumstances you'd be lucky to keep your development contract. And I think the floor is open for those type of guys.
There's going to be people looking at their rosters with a much finer tooth comb than usual.
Well, if you think, are you going to pay 250 grand for a senior player who may be a bit more injury prone, a bit longer in the turf, test rugby, whatever it might be, or you could sign 5 players under, on 40 granders.
And it's going to be a long season as well. But there's another can of worms here I just want to delve into. I'm mixing a lot of metaphors tonight. Paul Rees. I know. Paul Rees over at The Guardian, he just made an interesting point here, because this has been mentioned a couple of times, but when we have these games, Wales won't be playing in the Principality Stadium.
No.
That will still be used as, I think they call it a surge hospital. So they'll be played elsewhere in Wales or London, as has been done before. And Paul has a quote in a column that went up today from WRU Chief Executive Martin Phillips saying, the most difficult scenario will be if crowds are allowed in England while they're still not allowed in Wales. And the follow-up was there's a range of risks, not least Welsh fans leaving the country for a match and then returning.
Coming back, yeah.
Rugby does not exist in a vacuum. All these things are part of this equation. And you know what? It's messy. And there's things we just don't know yet.
Yeah.
That's right,
We've been a little bit behind, as you know, in Wales for centuries. But no, recently...
I'd argue you're ahead by being behind.
That is the point, you know, and a lot of people in Wales believe that we've been a bit safer, maybe. I don't know, proof's in the pudding, but you know, there is still an ambiguity when things like this crop up. You know, the debate has been about should we play in Wembley, should we play in Twickenham, which sounds great, but if we can't get there because we're not allowed to come back, then that is not the point of staging it there. They may as well stage it in, I don't know, North Wales or Rodney Parade or the Liberty Stadium or Parc y Scarlett. I don't know, or Cardiff City Stadium, let's say, which will hold 30,000. That would be something. And keep it in Wales, so at least we know we can go to that game, you know, and get home safely, if you like. It's a difficult one. It really is. And, you know, I sort of been thinking and talking with my family and friends that you sort of work in seasons, you sort of think, come the new season, September, it'll all be okay and we'll fall into line. But time's going on, isn't it? It's nearly August and we're still unsure of what's going to go on.
We are. There's a couple more comments have come in the last while. Stephen Kinnearly, hope that's pronounced that right, saying Gats likes durability for Lions. Can't see the likes of Billy, Manu, Toby, etc. with their current injury history lasting a Lions tour. It depends how the whole year goes before that.
I can't believe you are engaging in Lions talk, Mr. McGee.
I know, I was going to say.
It is July
changed.
2020.
It's also only a 5-week tour. It's not like a Willie John McBride tour. You know, I know, Stephen, and it's a good point. Player fatigue is something, but as we just discussed, I think Gats is going to be all over the coaching teams. The international coaches are going to be all over the club coaches about player welfare, and that's where the upgrading of academy players and then players into regional teams will happen, because we have to protect, and the eye has to be on the prize, the Lions tour. Simple as that. We cannot look back in the middle of August and say, do you know what? We didn't win the series against the world champions because our players were tired. He won't let that happen. Can't have that excuse.
Darren Bester chipping in, something we may or may not have discussed on the Saturday morning pod when Adam wasn't present. Any idea if more South African sides will join the Pro 14?
Or any other country?
Any other country at all? Who might field this question? Producer Adam.
Oh.
What? Sorry. I don't know why you'd ask me about that. So I think the most outrageous one we need to just acknowledge, the idea that the Jaguares would relocate to Spain and then start playing. Okay, look, let's just not go there. Okay, and Georgia, that's not going to happen. Okay, so all the real left field ones, let's just nip it in the bud. Don't start counting your chickens there. In terms of what's happening with us at the moment, look, we're trying to make sure that the Guinness Pro 14 is assembled, you know, can get back on track post COVID. But look, it's you know, our CEOs even said it in the last couple of years. Look, 16 teams, we have a model there that would work. And as far as South Africa goes, look, everyone has seen that logistically it works. You can go north to south, you can travel overnight. It's not like going from, you know, Argentina to South Africa to New Zealand over the course of 6 weeks, and the guys' body clocks are getting messed around. But to be quite honest, like, you've also got to remember that with Super Rugby Aotearoa and its success, and yes, they are planning that Trans-Tasman League, or maybe it sounds like it's being dictated by the New Zealanders to the Australians. That is very much being seen as a 1-year solution. So where that leaves South Africa at the moment is not maybe as clear cut as being made in the media. But I don't think anyone on our side is going to say that we are not interested in expansion, because I think there's certainly a possibility of that.
Adam, you should play more hard to get. That's a recommendation. Paul, I'm not sure this time zone thing actually works. I'd need to experience that for myself. What you think?
Well, I think you on a month fact-finding trip back and forth to Cape Town.
I think it's a selfless fact-finding trip.
Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to just will we bring the pod down on tour for the Lions?
Ticket to Cape Town. Oh man, my feelings on it. I'm all for bringing in South African Super Rugby teams. I'd have them in tomorrow morning, but we shall see.
We will. Huel Davies. Follow-up comment to earlier conversation. If you kept the internationals as in the test matches in Cardiff at Cardiff City Stadium, hospitality and bars can stay afloat. This is it. Yeah. All these things are connected, and these are the discussions which they will be having at that level. They're all connected.
Trust me, even if the games are taken to London, the hospitality and bars don't have any problem staying afloat in Cardiff.
I want to. Well, before we start finishing up here, Adam and Sean, I want you to have a look through some of these comments and choose a winner for some of our bear hug swag that we might give.
I don't think it's a winner, because I think it's a very there might be some dubiousness. That Robert Parfitt, he said Nick Williams of Bear Hug is his favourite 8, who we didn't even mention, by the way, in the Dream Team, the Ultimate 15 discussion, and Nick, who has played in Ireland, in twice in Italy. He's done a great job at Cardiff. Absolute, like he definitely deserves to be in the mix. Kyle Reese. Kyle, if you could prove to me that you're going to use the equipment, then you can try again next week.
He's too rich.
I don't know.
I tell you what, exactly. I tell you it was close, and he definitely doesn't need the equipment. It's Shane Williams who chose those wingers. One for coming on, World Player of the Year 2002, having the audacity to say who chose those wingers. That's up there, Shane's. But look, we've had quite a few in. It's difficult to pick one. Stephen Kenley came in late and added some good Lions points. I'll have to leave it to our producer.
I'm going to go with Howell Davies. He's always interacting and engaging with us, and he's always making salient points as well.
Yes.
So I tell you what, we'll get you some. If you can drop us a DM on Twitter at Under the Sticks with an X. We'll put you in touch with the guys at Bear Hug, and maybe we'll see if the guys at Bear Hug can send something Shane's way as well.
They do. So Bear Hug, we talked about them when Nick was on, because he's on the board there now. But this is the bit where Bear Hug are the unmistakable orange muscle sleeves and joint supports. Uniquely using bamboo in the makeup of their supports, the difference in composition can increase blood flow and dramatically reduce rehabilitation and recovery periods while enhancing performance. Visit getabearhug.com. That's it. Yeah, that's where you get the orange things.
You're like a pro, Andy. You're like a pro when you say
McGeady, that I tell you what, you could get VO work doing that. Voiceover work. Yeah, definitely.
If I knew someone in marketing who could, put me forward, Paul,
I may be able to help you. Tell you what, good. Money for old rope doing voiceovers, man alive. If you were under 16 in school, ask your careers too, and you don't know what you're going to do, just say I want to do voiceover work. Oh.
What did out of interest, what did your careers person say that you would become when you grew up?
Just swore at me, told me to get out. I don't really remember. I wanted to be a chef when I was younger. That didn't go very well.
Sean, can you recall?
They thought I'd be, at one point some sort of sportsman, and secondly a teacher. So they weren't far off.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Adam?
I think I got two things. It was very funny. I got because they got us to like do a questionnaire, and the computer spat out a couple of things, and I remember Paul's gonna love this. I got journalist or hairdresser.
You joke. Very
That's
good.
not bad.
The timing of that point was brilliant. I love that. Very good.
We're ending the show. We're ending the show right there. We can't beat that. No, we can't beat that.
And for those who are listening and who have never watched us live, I am,
there's a reason that's very funny.
Yeah, I'm not so blessed.
Tune in next week.
That was Under the Sticks. Join us on Saturday morning for our Super Rugby Aotearoa watch along, where we watch the games and we do this and we just have a chat while we're watching the game. It's pretty loose, but join us. It's good crack. Thank you very much to Owain Jones to join us for the ultimate Guinness Pro 14-15 earlier on. Thanks to producer Adam Redmond. Thank you, Sean Holley. Thank you, Paul Williams. That was Under the Sticks, brought to you by Big Red Cloud. My name's Andy McGeady. We'll talk to you soon.
He called me cheetah, cheetah, cheetah. Ooh, cheetah, cheetah, cheetah. I